you're going to be here at Lakeside Retreats for
right.
the Mind Under Matter Campout Festival, September 9th through 11th. So Cole's just going to be kind of setting up a couple minutes about his background for context, and then just opening it up to questions. So it'll be kind of completely guided by you guys in the audience.
Yeah.
And
it's going to be a science and music and comedy festival, which are three of my favorite things. And so I'll be expecting the audience. I won't know what to expect from the audience, so I look forward to seeing what their questions will be for me.
Are we?
Yes.
Where are we?
Here.
Why are we here? Not entirely clear. We are misfits thrust into existence by random chance, with no hints at all as to how we're supposed to make sense of it all. It's immensely bizarre. Here we are.
hello, everybody, and welcome to the Here We Are podcast. I'm here at Lakeside Retreats, where the Mind Under Matter Campout Festival will be September 9th through 11th, camping until the Monday the 12th, and Patreon Day on Thursday the 8th. We're doing all sorts of things, including music on the stage that we're at right now, and then across the lake behind us, if you're watching on video on YouTube or Spotify, we're having science talks. We're having all sorts of other things as well. I've been talking about this for a bit, but you can go to mindunderpod.com to find out more about that. And I happen to have one of my very best friends in the world who is also going to be at the science area giving what I imagine is going to be one of the more popular talks, Q&As, kind of presentations over there. And he's been on the show multiple times in the past. My friend Cole Marta is joining me. Hello, Cole.
It's good to be back.
Yeah, you got
to be here.
Yeah, you got to see the whole area. You got to help me hatch plans all weekend.
Yeah.
This has been a lot of fun. I'm currently because I've screwed up every single thing since every time I've tried to record Here We Are in Raleigh. I thought I had my second microphone and it was an empty microphone bag for some reason. So I'm using a Zoom H6 to record myself, a nice piece of equipment if you're getting into podcasting. But if you're on video and you're like, why does this mic look like that? It's because of extreme circumstances, but it sounds great.
Luckily, we're in a beautiful setting, but unfortunately, there is not a microphone store at the lake.
No, not right at there's a little general store with some snacks and things like that, but they are out of microphones currently.
We got the last one.
And this is actually serendipitous, but the reason that we're here, we actually recorded before remotely, and I screwed up the recording, and then Cole was coming to visit anyway. So I was like, we'll just record on the stage.
Yeah,
and
this is much more exciting.
Yeah, it is. This is beautiful, and we've been having these conversations for years about the work that you do.
Yep.
We went out and saw some of the bands that are going to be here last night. You got to meet a couple of my new friends in town and stuff, and everyone always has lots of questions for you when they find out what you do. So why don't you tell people about yourself and what you do?
Sure. My name is Dr. Cole Marta. I'm a psychiatrist. And since my residency training, I've taken a particular interest in emerging potential healing effects of potential medical applications of different psychedelics, primarily ketamine. I also do research with the Multidisciplinary Association for Psychedelic Studies, MAPS. I'm the principal investigator in Los Angeles for the phase 2 and phase 3 trials there. And we've been doing the MDMA-assisted psychotherapy for PTSD studies for the last 5 years, and been working clinically with ketamine for the last 7 years. Published some peer-reviewed articles on both of those topics and a couple of other psychedelic related peer-reviewed articles. And that's been my interest for the last probably like 10 years, but directly involved in the work for the last 7.
Wonderful. So one of the things that I get a lot of messages from people regarding psychedelics, and I pretty much, that's a good way for me to not answer you. If you write me about psychedelics on social media, usually it's like someone wants some sort of guidance of some kind. Sure. And it's a situation where even if I were qualified to give such advice, it's not, you don't give medical advice over a direct message on Instagram.
Yeah. Especially if you're not a medical professional.
Especially if you're not a medical professional. And so I don't mean anything personal by it when I don't write those people back, but I don't feel comfortable with it. And especially when people are like, do you know where I can score DMT in Indianapolis? So you imagine that I know how to get DMT in Indianapolis, and you imagine that I'm going to connect you with my illegal drug dealer over a DM. And that's the help that I'm eager to provide for people. But one of the very reasonable questions that I get all of the time, and people have so many questions about because this is a new emerging field, is how the heck do you get into psychedelic therapy? This is such a booming, exciting area right now. That's right. Still, that I think you'd agree, there's still a lot of research to be done and data to be gathered.
Absolutely,
and so there's a lot of kind of underground stuff that happens and some of it might be very good, but it's certainly unregulated, and that comes with a fair number of issues, risks for the people trying to seek help, risks for the people trying to give help or make money or whatever else. So what was your path? How did you get into this?
So I went to medical school, and after medical school, I discovered that what I wanted to do was psychiatry. And I had been kind of aware of MAPS and MAPS's research. And just as I was graduating from medical school and applying to residency, MAPS was starting to get serious about, they'd already started their preliminary MDMA trials, and they were getting serious about putting together their phase 2 and phase 3 trials. So I just connected with them when I was on the residency application and interview trail, and sort of stayed in contact with them through my training. And what I did was I focused on, like, how can I be, what would be useful to this endeavor of asking these questions about whether psychedelics can actually be medicines. And so that's what I would say to people who are interested in becoming psychedelic therapists themselves. People who are interested in becoming psychedelic therapists is focus on becoming a therapist, becoming a really good therapist. Get the best training that you can. It's a very exciting field, and there's a lot of information out there. There's a lot of excitement out there. The science of it, to figure out how to best use it and for what the medical indications are, moves very, very slow. So even if you're starting now and it feels like, you're missing the boat or something, the vast majority of this work is still ahead of us. Mm-hmm. If you are right now trying to decide how you want to get involved in it, the best way to get involved in it is to focus on your training as a therapist, because the more I work with psychedelics in the medical context, the more I realize that it's that therapy training that is the bulk of the knowledge base that comes in handy when working with people. We're doing the science slowly and deliberately and figuring out, safety and efficacy, boundaries and guidelines. That information is added to sort of the body of knowledge slowly, so you can build your skills as a therapist and take into account and apply the new information as it becomes available.
So this is because you've kind of you have the Center for Psychedelic Therapy in California, which has which if it's something that you're looking into, contact the Center for Psychedelic Therapy, which Cole is a co-founder and the director of, and there is quite a bit of demand. You had a lot of you had various experience working with other practices, and then you went out on your own.
Yeah.
And opened it right before COVID. And most people in the world that had a business of any kind when a global pandemic struck and lockdowns and uncertainty of the virus and the severity and everything else, and it was rough on everyone economically, and people like myself that could no longer perform. But you actually did pretty well in being a medical. That's certainly an advantage of being a legitimate medical establishment is we are essential workers. We do get direct access to the latest on how to operate within a pandemic safely. People still need their treatments, and there were some adjustments that were made to make it safe and effective. But it was terrifying. We opened we put all of our energy and money, myself and my awesome team at California Center for Psychedelic Therapy, Jamie and Brooke and Ashley and Joseph and Haley and Lisa. We put all our eggs into this basket, and we didn't know what was going to happen November 2019. And then the pandemic hit just after we had on our own remodeled the building and perfected the space the way we really thought it would be most effective. It's
to
so
contain
beautiful and incredible.
Yeah.
If it's, I've been there, and it's just amazing. And in LA, which means also expensive to make an amazing facility in LA. Yeah,
it was a big gamble. And you visited, and Rick Doblin and a handful of people came. Actually, this was the timing. It was we hosted a bunch of people to show them, look at our brand new place. And that day was the first day they were starting to say don't shake hands anymore. More to come. Yeah. And I remember that was the first time I was around people, and people were like, do we elbow bump or what do we do? So that was the timing of opening, the center that we're currently in now. We'd been building up to it. But now we have a beautiful center. We have 6 treatment rooms. We have an amazing medical team, amazing psychotherapy team. Another doctor, Dr. Burke, works with us on both the MDMA trials and the ketamine work. And we just have an awesome team going. Luckily, during the pandemic for our business, unfortunate for our species, the pandemic is, really difficult on people. So their mental health was really important during this. So we were scared, but business-wise, things were working out. And the demand has been fairly steady ever since. So the hope is to continue to grow and continue to potentially open new clinics and work with new trained people.
I bring that up because business is booming. It's been booming since the beginning. I know just from our many discussions that you were way on top of things from the beginning, but you've also come a long way in terms of the admin aspects of it and scheduling and figuring out the right people to work with and everything. And so right now, if you want treatment at at Cole's clinic, there may be like a little bit of a way, not that you shouldn't look into it, and they can usually
Right.
see you pretty soon. But the reason I bring it up is because I know things are so busy for you. You would be thrilled to find another one or two like perfect people that were like really well qualified
Sure.
to do this, but what you are kind of looking for when you hire people, because I know in the past you've worked with a lot of some people just had lots and lots of experience within the kind of underground or whatever psychedelic therapy models, and less of the like straightforward clinical training. And then you have more people that had more of the clinical training and then needed to be trained in psychedelics. And I know we've had these discussions where kind of to reiterate what you were saying earlier, by far and away, it's the people that have like the real the experience in the clinical training, and
Right.
getting them up to speed on dealing
Right.
with a new substance or something like that is,
Sure.
is
Yeah, I mean, and I think across the whole field, like earlier on, before we were working with them as medicines, primarily that was the only way psychedelics have been being used, was in these kind of gray area or underground ways. And there was certainly wisdom there in, like aspects of containing and holding space for people. But as we've absolutely crystallized our mission as working with severe mental illness, it's become really critical to value what we know from 150 years of mental health as a science, of psychiatry and psychology, for working with people who have treatment-resistant depression, PTSD, these diagnoses, all the things that are important clinically for working with somebody who isn't just having a psychedelic experience. It's somebody who is potentially taking a psychedelic medicine for a mental health condition. We focus specifically on working with people who have these diagnoses. And I think that's why we've certainly moved and continued to refine what it is that we are looking for. And I think the field that I'm in, if people are interested in that, if people are interested in being psychedelic therapists, psychedelic psychiatrists, being involved in psychedelic science, that means being a scientist, that means being a therapist, that means being a psychiatrist, and knowing your diagnoses, knowing your treatment plans, knowing, how to work with all of those conditions in the room, how to hold space for somebody in crisis. All those kinds of things have gotten to be like, because that's where our qualifications are and where I think we have the most value to society. That's why that's sort of been the evolution from, wanting to learn from people who'd been working with psychedelics in the beginning to, okay, but we're going to be working with psychedelics in the context of medicine and mental health.
Now, I'm curious if you could, because there's all of these kind of terms that you hear within the psychedelic space about set and setting and intention and integration, and I think that I've always thought it was kind of a shame that those terms seem to just be reserved for the psychedelic space, where they are like very valuable conditions in all of life, in anything that you're doing, and setting intentions when you start each day, and thinking about
setting, taking stock of your mindset and your environment. Yeah, important beyond the treatment room for sure.
And one of the it's been fun hanging out this weekend, because it's fun building a festival, and some of it's fun because there's really silly stuff that I get to put together, and then other aspects are all of the like busyness of it that is like very adulty, and like lining up porta potty type stuff that people aren't like, woohoo, I get to I get to line up the porta potty business and figure out how many we're going to have and how often they're going to be cleaned. And but so many of the same things apply. Whether it's, I mean, I think set and setting is, I mean, important. Going to a movie theater or anything else, you know, people put a lot of effort into these details, at least the places that do it right, any restaurant that you go to. And so it's fun kind of figuring out the proper sort of container, as they say in the psychedelic space, that kind of applies to any time that you're caring for people or entertaining people or providing some service for others.
And that seems to be like the creative art endeavor for our company now that I really enjoy a lot, is like, you know, we're perfecting like our sheet game and our blanket game.
Yeah.
Well, that's what right blankets.
That's exactly where I was going. That's where I was going. I was hoping maybe you could share, because also just some of those things might be like, I've found that some of the things that make like a perfect psychedelic setting are also just things that make for a really nice place to relax or whatever that you want to have in your home or whatever else.
Yeah.
And so
we've done it so well at my office that I like just being at my office.
Yeah. That's amazing. Not many people get to say that.
Right. Like, I don't mind going there and being there all day.
So break down some of that. That could be fun.
Yeah.
Maybe if you want to start with kind of the basic necessities and then build, and maybe some of the newer things you've been thinking about. Yeah.
So like when I started, it was like, what's the right amount of time for a visit, for example? And what are the essential supports? What are the essential set and setting things? So in the beginning, it was like, okay, eye shades and headphones were important. Learn that from the MDMA work. You know, having somebody have an internal experience. Ketamine, for example, is a very internal experience, more so than MDMA. And so we want people to be able to feel comfortable and supported going inside. So refining the playlist was like the first probably year, consulting with holotropic breathwork practitioners and other psychedelic researchers. The Johns Hopkins team put together playlists, and members of our team talked to members of their team about how they make those selections. Also, the holotropic breathwork practitioners in Los Angeles, we talked to a lot. And my first playlist that I had, that I used for my patients when I was doing it all by myself.
GWAR, I bet. It was mostly GWAR.
Megadeth, Anthrax, Hatebreed. No, it was this beautiful soundtrack that the holotropic breathwork practitioner in Venice put together for me, and that was what I used primarily for most of my patients for like the first year. So then it came down to like, well, and I had the support medicines, for example. I have something in case people get nausea. I have something in case our blood pressure is high. I have something in case people panic, which almost never happens, literally near zero. But I have all of those things. So now the room has like over the years evolved to like a number of playlists that we've come to trust as a group, gotten feedback from people, setting up, you know, getting the couches, the right number of chairs, the couch, the right size table to house, you know, the right little bowls for the support meds if they're needed. Like every little thing is like been crafted and perfected to support this system, down to the number of sheets we have in the building, having a washer and dryer, you know, like all of that stuff.
Amazing.
Yeah.
And it's funny because I'm sure it's the same where, you know, I'm doing a lot of things for what I realized from putting together a festival is that, like, oh man, there is definitely a degree of difference between the people that put all their effort into just getting people there. And then people that figure out like what it's actually going to be like when they are there.
Sure.
And things like porta potty situations, which when I found out how cheap it was to, not that it's cheap, but how much less, how much little money it is comparatively once the porta potties are actually here, once they're already being serviced, how little more it is just to have them serviced more regularly, like twice a day instead of once a day or whatever in the busy areas. It made me upset about so many of my porta potty experiences in the past. And so, you know, I'm hoping to do things. I think I'm going to check to see if we can have like the paper things on the seat and stuff like and that's the sort of stuff like very few people are going to thank you for, you know, but if it's bad, people are going to notice, and that's going to stick out. And I'm sure there's a lot of things like that within. And
like in my space, all credit is due to the team around me. Brooke is certainly the head designer, I would say, of the layout. A lot of people have definitely contributed to it, and I am completely oblivious to it, but I know it when I see it, especially now. You know, I have more experience now because of this experience of building this clinic, and it's been beautiful. Like, I think you're right. Like, it's not something you'll definitely necessarily notice, but if you go somewhere else, you'll notice it's very different from where you came from if you went to ours first, you know? Or if you went to another clinic first and you come to ours, you know, like the room, we have all the necessary safety and medical equipment, but it's like stowed appropriately. It doesn't feel like a medical office. That's an important part to us of creating a safe container. We try to minimize the inherent power dynamic, like the feeling of the power dynamic, by, you know, we dress fairly casually. Those kinds of like subtleties too is like a part of the aesthetic at our place. Yeah.
So another thing that I get a lot, so, and this is another one where like once in a while I'm like, oh, you know, sometimes I will answer. But one thing I won't get is if you had like your crazy DMT experience or you had your own like manic episode or whatever, and you saw my documentary and now you want advice because of your thing. I'm like, I can't tell you much more than to like seek professional help. But one that I'm more understanding with is people that are really psychedelic naive. They've never done a psychedelic before. They are looking for something, and they've tried other therapies and perhaps medications and things in the past. And if I do answer people back when they ask like, where should I start? What would you recommend? Almost all of the time I say, well, why don't you just see if there's legal ketamine therapy in your area? Because it's legal, it's professional. And although for me personally, I tend to, like looking back, attribute more mental health progress toward mushrooms, which is they've also backfired on me. But what I think is also just incredible about ketamine is, and why it's like, I'm kind of like, well, why not try this? If you're seeking this before like going to Peru and doing the ayahuasca thing and everything, like ketamine, it's a pretty safe experience when used appropriately in a clinical setting and everything. It's kind of short. It doesn't have negative interactions with other things. I know like a lot of people I know of a lot of people that have tried mushrooms that have, as a last resort, have tried every other medication.
Right.
And they just like don't really do anything at all just because they're still on so many like whatever antidepressants or whatever else. And to have to go through like getting off of those things to potentially.
Even the MDMA work, like MDMA, psilocybin, which is being, I'm glad you brought that up. Like psilocybin is fairly far along in its process of asking this important question of whether this is something that can be helpful, safe, and effective for indications like depression. So we're not there yet. We don't know exactly, the evidence is promising that it can be helpful, but even if it turns out that data, that those studies are done, and I hope that they are, and I hope that it is true that there can be used safely and effectively for a certain amount of people with depression. It still would probably be, I think if psilocybin became available in the next year and we were considering, half of our team is already trained in the models being used in the psilocybin assisted psychotherapy for depression trials too. So we're planning to be ready for that when that in the event that becomes an FDA approved medicine. Like even if that were available right away, I still think ketamine's rates of response are so high, and it's such an easier for the patient introduction for someone who's treatment naive and has depression and is not necessarily looking to have a psychedelic experience and is just looking to get rid of their depression. I think it's easier to work with. It's shorter. It doesn't require. Most people will be on antidepressants who have treatment-resistant depression. It's not that the antidepressants don't do anything for their depression. It's just that they're still depressed, but they're worse when they don't take their antidepressants. So in those cases, with MDMA and psilocybin, as I understand it now, it's still best methods to take people completely off of those meds, and that can take a while to do, and people can really struggle to come off of medications and things. So a beautiful thing about ketamine is that it works on a completely different neurotransmitter system. That's one of the exciting scientific breakthroughs about it, is we found something that doesn't work on serotonin or dopamine, at least not primarily, that affects depression. And that's really important for a number of reasons. One, you don't have nearly as many safety concerns around people taking, too many serotonin modulating things at the same time. People can continue to take their antidepressants and have a trial of ketamine. You'll know quickly if it's going to be helpful. You'll know in the first 1 to 3 treatments, 1 to 3 or 4 treatments. With anything that works on serotonin, somebody, for example, who may be bipolar, you risk, there's a higher risk for manic switching, for example. Like when you start even a traditional antidepressant on somebody who has bipolar 2, there's a risk of them switching into a hypomanic episode. Then you change your treatment plan and address that. With ketamine, it hasn't been shown to have that effect on people, at least not yet. And, we're now 20 years since the original study in 2001, where they demonstrated ketamine can be safe, can be effective for treating depression. So we've got a good amount of data that suggests that there is not this, at least not a large risk of switching somebody or having some other untoward effect on their mood as a result of the treatment itself, which I think would be a risk with psilocybin. So I am not at all bad-mouthing psilocybin. I'm a huge fan of the research who are doing that research, researchers that are doing that research. And I am very hopeful that it will be another tool in our toolbox. But I don't think it's necessarily, I don't think one should be hoping to replace the other or anything like that. I think it's going to be great that in psychiatry in general, we're going to have a lot more tools in our toolkit, hopefully in the next 4 or 5 years.
One would think that a ketamine treatment would be a great deal cheaper as well, just because of the duration of the experience too. And,
right.
And so just in terms of scheduling, in terms of accessibility, in terms of the medical costs, and probably as there's varying degrees of insurance coverage, my hunch would be that insurance will be more likely to be covering ketamine, a thing that's been around longer, even once mushrooms or psilocybin rather, 'cause it's usually the psilocybin pill. It hits the clinical settings and is approved for normal use. I still think it's going to be behind in terms of being accessible for people of various income brackets.
Yeah, and in general, accessibility is its own whole Hydra monster, as is the insurance universe. But yes, ketamine, from a resource standpoint too, I think for people is more reasonable. Like with psilocybin experiences, you're talking about a minimum of 5 to 6 hour experience to be supported, plus preparation and, ensuring safety afterward. It's likely going to be a day-long thing, and that's what we expect to see with the MDMA. Certainly that's what we do in the trials where we're trying to establish whether or not this is safe and effective. With the MDMA, is those sessions are all day long. That's new to my knowledge. There's no treatments in psychiatry that are day-long treatments, which is another, real beautiful thing about the serendipity of where myself and my team were in our careers when this is also emerging, that we've been able to build from the ground up a clinic with these things in mind, rather than, being a clinic that is used to doing 30-minute mid-manage appointments and hour-long therapy appointments and trying to shoehorn in 90-minute ketamine sessions and 8-hour MDMA sessions. Like, we're really creating the space with foresight to if these things get FDA approval and they're shown to truly be safe and effective, that's the kind of work we'd like to be involved in. So the space is also being created with those potential treatments in mind as well.
But if you were just a psilocybin assisted therapist, you'd be seeing 5 people a week.
Right. At the most.
At the most.
Like that, that's a heavy 5 days.
Yeah.
The work, that's another thing to think about, that aspiring therapists or currently training therapists should know is the MDMA work for PTSD, work with PTSD is heavy.
Yeah.
It's not, this isn't fun. People aren't having fun in their psychedelic therapy. People have fun with psychedelics in other settings.
And they sometimes have laughs and stuff. And
sure, it's important.
Insights and everything.
For some people, that is where a lot of healing can happen, is connecting to joy again. But with trauma, especially, people are by definition there to talk about the worst thing that's ever happened to them. Right. So it's heavy. And so doing the work, that's something that I think anybody aspiring to do this work should know, that it isn't fun. It's rich. If your goal is to have the funnest career, it is very fun. The people are great. The patients are great. It is fun work, but it's also heavy. And I think, I was somebody who at one point thought that life was about having the most fun. And I've changed, I think, to life's, to me, it's about having the richest experiences and the richest life. And these are thick with richness. These experiences are thick with that. But but they can be demanding and they can be taxing and they can be very emotional. And so it's important, if you're planning to do this work, to also be taking care of your own mental health and, not burning yourself out, not planning to see 5 MDMA sessions a week. Yeah. Don't do day-long dives into people's worst times. Sitting with that 5 times a week would be a lot to ask of anybody. So that's something that we're, being very mindful of in how we're, seeing the future of, really putting limits on our therapists of how many of each kind of sessions. And we'll have these discussions openly with our therapists who are doing this work too. What's a good balance, work-life balance, so that we can be there 100% for our people.
Yeah. So it's always tricky with this kind of, with having someone like yourself on the show. It's trickier than, like, usually when I have a scientist on my show, I don't even consider, like, oh, maybe people know a bunch of this stuff already. But because of the interest in psychedelics, it runs the gamut of people that are going to be listening and watching right now, go from people that have already gone down the wormhole of every book and psychedelic video they can possibly find, and some people that have never once, don't know what MDMA is, never taken a psychedelic, never researched psychedelics. It's kind of all over the place. And so saying that, I want to give a little background. So I met Cole originally, and you can kind of go back to past episodes and hear us talk about our background more. But I met him. I started doing a psychedelic comedy show that was pretty psychedelic research heavy, or I tend to be more scientifically oriented and skeptical and about, in comparison to some of the other aspects of the psychedelic community out there. And so when I started putting together this show and this act, I really wanted to, and I had Here We Are, I wanted to find, I didn't know, I wasn't in the psychedelic world. I just had these, profound experiences, and that were impactful and life-changing and hilarious at times. And so I wanted to, I took more time than I can just look up a university usually and be like, oh, what do you got? A beetle researcher? Sure, what the heck? Let's hear about beetles. But when it came to psychedelics, I know that people's experience and, the difference between claims that are made by some and the actual evidence that is out there to support claims, and who is following kind of proper scientific methods. There's a huge spectrum. And so I kind of, through doing research, stumbled upon MAPS, the Multidisciplinary Association of Psychedelic Studies. And that's how Cole and I met. And I wonder if you could just give just a little brief overview about the Multidisciplinary Association of Psychedelic Studies to set up that you kind of got approval to share some recent data and findings. Right.
Yeah, so the Multidisciplinary Association for Psychedelic Studies has been around since the mid-'80s. It was founded by Rick Doblin. And its goal was to essentially to demonstrate whether or not MDMA or other psychedelics are medicines. And for the first 15 to 20 years, it was mostly telling everybody that was the mission and spreading the word and getting support and making relationships. This is my own understanding. But in the early mid 2000s, they actually started to get enough resources, including learning about the systems of the regulatory agencies that oversee this kind of research. And they tried to do their first MDMA assisted psychotherapy for PTSD trial. That was in the mid 2000s. Michael and Annie 𝕊𝕐𝕕 conducted that study with the funding of MAPS in South Carolina. And it was repeated. There were a few studies also done with the team in Boulder. So their work has been primarily, they support in different ways, different psychedelic research that's going on in lots of different fields and in lots of different ways. But their main focus has been on MDMA and making MDMA assisted psychotherapy for PTSD go through the FDA approval process. So yeah, I got connected with them, and I've been working on at the phase 2 portion of that process in the mid 2010s. So in 2016 or so, our team started, I assembled the team in Los Angeles, and our team started training in the methodology and getting prepared to conduct the studies. And in 2017, I think, is when we started seeing our very first study participants for phase 2. And we finished a phase 2 trial. We finished a phase 3 trial. That one was published. The phase 3 trial is the big one. The phase 3 trial, and this might be, something worth reviewing. Phase 3 is like the end, when there's a lot of exciting research going on with psychedelics, and there are a lot of articles that you'll read about, a study that showed that DMT did this, and a study that showed that people who drink ayahuasca as part of a tradition have, less incidences of alcoholism. Those trials are like the preliminary trials that build the evidence to even be allowed to suggest doing a real clinical trial. That's where a lot of psychedelic research is and has been since all the excitement about psychedelics. The FDA has a very formal process for demonstrating whether or not something can be a medicine, what meeting criteria for safety and efficacy. And so phase 1 is proof of concept, showing that your medicine can be actually safely ingested by people. And so you have to present all of your evidence for why you think this could safely even be given to people. Then prove it with your phase 1 trial. Phase 2 is about, okay, now we're saying we think that this medicine that can be safely administered to human beings can be safely administered to human beings with a particular condition, and it may help those people with that condition. So those are smaller trials, a couple dozen people typically. And that's where we got into the process at my site, was in the phase 2 process, where we were giving people we knew had PTSD, we were giving them known MDMA, and just measuring all kinds of outcomes, primarily the CAPS, the clinically administered PTSD scale, and demonstrating whether or not those improved. So phase 2 is about demonstrating that your idea holds water. Then phase 3 is the last step. So phase 3 is what we've been doing for the last 3 or 4 years. And that's when you have multiple centers seeing as many people as you can to make sure that this is effective regardless, this can be effectively deployed as a treatment to a large number of people. That's one thing. That it works when you give it to a large number of people, that you didn't just sort of get lucky in your phase 2 trial. And a lot of it is to do with safety, making sure that you see enough people that you get, that there isn't some rare thing that could come up safety-wise that you didn't see in the smaller study you did before. So in that process, MDMA for PTSD with MAPS is the furthest along, in all of the research that's being done by psychedelics. And a lot of the psychedelic research that's coming behind MDMA has been sort of because of the trail that MAPS and MDMA has blazed to, like, this is how you can do this, and this is how this research can be done appropriately. So that's what MAPS is. MAPS is, the ones that figured out how to, ask these questions in a way that was acceptable to the scientific community, the regulatory agencies. And we're at the very, very, very finish line now. I mean, I feel like I've been saying that for years, but we really are. MDMA is likely going to be the first one that is formally reviewed by the FDA for whether or not they are going to approve it. Like that, the data that they ask for will be able to be presented to them, hopefully this year.
Amazing.
Yeah.
It's very exciting.
Yeah.
So as very soon there might be MDMA, and maybe psilocybin will follow shortly after as well. This is kind of this is meant to be my last question. I'm just telling you that in case there's like other things that you want to throw in that we've forgotten about. But what kind of things what sort of things should people be looking for in terms of, as this is so new, and even though there are regulatory bodies involved in what can be done and what is legal and what various practices are allowed and aren't, it still is and can be in areas in some context a little bit of the Wild West out there still, and varying differences in, say, experience levels and backgrounds of people that are allowed to administer ketamine. I know because I've had we were just talking about my friend Jeff the other day, who shared a horrible experience where he got clinical ketamine, and Rihanna, my assistant, she eventually found a spot that she liked, but the first spot that she went to was, there was no therapy involved. They shot you full of ketamine and then booted you out immediately after. You didn't even get to wait in a waiting room after your session for your ride to show up. You're just out, get out in the parking lot, and that's that. And so how can people, what can people do to find and even gauge any kind of research of who would be legit? What are the sort of red flags people should look for, or that sort of thing? Yeah.
So if you're looking, I'm going to be biased towards psychiatry. So there are a few fields of medicine that are opening, that are kind of commonly found in running ketamine clinics. So that's sort of, if we start there, is like our broadest category, ketamine clinics. There are ones being run by anesthesiologists, which is great because anesthesiologists have been working with ketamine since the 70s. So anesthesiologists are extremely practiced and skilled in working with ketamine and human beings, right? And then psychiatry is, in the last probably 2 years, there's finally more psychiatrists who are getting into ketamine, opening ketamine clinics. And psychiatry is that way because psychiatry has been working with depression for 150, as long as psychiatry has been around, and psychology before that. And so it took a while for psychiatrists to get access to the appropriate safety and efficacy data and the how to work with the medicine. And so I think that was a little lag, was we want psychiatrists, wanting to make sure that they can work with the medicine safely and effectively, and prepare their clinics to operate appropriately. And so I think if what you're looking for is what I do, and like our clinic, I can say honestly, our clinic is focused on trying to be the highest quality that we can. And so ketamine assisted psychotherapy, which is mostly what I've been talking about this whole talk, that that is a lingo you can look for in the language. CAP, K-A-P. Sometimes K-A-T, depending on where you are regionally. But CAP, ketamine-assisted psychotherapy, should be, at the very least, not just administered the ketamine, but also supported with a therapist. That comes in all kinds of flavors and things now, too. I will say there are market forces, and capitalism is pervasive, and so there are varying degrees of that too. But I think if you're going to be having a ketamine experience, even if you aren't intending to have a psychedelic experience, it's likely that you will at the doses that we know are effective for depression. So it's good to have somebody who can at least support you with that experience and honor that it may be valuable to you. That would be CAP, ketamine-assisted psychotherapy, or ketamine-assisted therapy. I am partial to in-office sessions only. Not all places operate that way, but I have my reasons that I'm sticking to, that I think that that's the best and safest and highest quality way to do it. So those are the things to kind of look out for. There are less expensive maybe ways, like the absolute cheapest ways. Least expensive, accessible ways from that way are going to be some compromise of those things. Places where a doctor is overseeing the ketamine, and a therapist or a guide, or not quite a therapist, but somebody who will sit with you. If that's what you're looking for, that's sort of one branch of what you'll find when you're looking out there. Most anesthesiologists or emergency medicine or internal medicine doctors that are offering it don't offer the psychotherapy component with it as well. So that's better than nothing, but those clinics are also actually usually more expensive than psychiatric clinics, because there's a lot of, those are more expensive businesses in general. Anesthesiologists have a lot of equipment and things like that I think justify it being a higher price point for people usually. So probably got a little into the weeds on that, but that was...
No, that's perfect. No, it's people, that's probably the question that most people are the most interested in, and knowing, and probably the most important one. So it's good to be specific about the complexity of it.
If I'm advising a family or friend, I'm advising them to, like I said, I'm biased, find a place like ours, a place that's got a doctor that is going to be managing the medicine and your medical aspects of your care, and a mental health professional who is going to be supporting you with the experiential part that is more or less inevitable, and preferably in the office.
Okay. Well, you're going to be here at Lakeside Retreat for the Mind Under Matter Campout Festival, September 9th through 11th in Raleigh, just 20 short minutes from downtown Raleigh. It's 45 minutes from the airport, which is where I need to drive Cole to right now. And so we're having at the across the lake, if you're watching on video, where the science talks are planned, unless we decide on a better area for some other reason. Anyway, there'll be a dedicated area where scientists will be giving talks, and it'll run a range of things. I'm kind of telling people that, there's going to be an hour between each band. And we anticipate kind of starting talks 15 minutes after that to give people a chance to walk the 5 minutes around the lake to that area and use the bathroom or get some water or whatever else. And then I'm kind of telling my scientist guests that they'll get to, have 30 to 45 minutes of kind of uninterrupted, distractionless stuff before the next music starts. But then it's kind of with the music going in the background. It's kind of nice, has a nice conversational feel to it and everything. And so some people are giving like a 30-minute talk or 45-minute talk and then getting into a Q&A, but then some people are just bringing things to present and answering questions the whole time. And because you're not a professor that spends a lot of time in front of classes teaching, you're the most comfortable and obviously just from hanging out with people last night, it's probably what people want the most anyway, is just answering questions. So Cole's just going to be kind of setting up a couple minutes about his background for context, and then just opening it up to questions. So it'll be kind of completely guided by you guys in the audience.
Yeah.
And
it's going to be a science and music and comedy festival, which are three of my favorite things. And so I'll be expecting the audience. I won't know what to expect from the audience, so I look forward to seeing what their questions will be for me.
Yeah, it's going to be great. So check it out. If you're anywhere near the Raleigh area, my goodness, if you're within an 8-hour drive of Raleigh, 10-hour drive of Raleigh, and you aren't going to come and camp out with us, you are really missing out on what's going to be an incredible experience. I get that flights are expensive and everything else, but if you can make a drive and come out, it's going to be a fantastic time. So again, consider that at mindunderpod.com to find more details, and we're adding more of the we have most of the musicians booked, just haven't updated the website yet, as we're kind of working on scheduling the comics, and lots more being added. So check that out. And there's early bird specials and things like that. And go to the Center for Psychedelic Therapy.
At www.psychedelictherapyca, as in the state of California, psychedelictherapyca.com. And shout out to the whole CCPT team, Jamie, Brooke, everybody at CCPT, New School Research, the team that does the research, Lisa, and all of our tremendous therapists and study physicians. We got an awesome team there. So yeah, come check us out.
And Brooke and Ashley have been on the podcast before too. So if you're going back, if you want to hear Cole's other episodes, but you can also hear me interview Ashley Booth, and one of the Cole's episodes Brooke was on as well, right? That was, or wait, who was on with you? Yeah,
Shannon Carlin has been on.
That's what it was. Okay, never mind.
Brooke would be great.
Well, we'll have Brooke on sometime in the future. You guys are terrific. Thanks for being such wonderful, curious people. We'll talk with you more next week.